Okay, so I was born in 1923, and I was a second child of Gert and Floyd. And at that time, I just had one sister, Verge, who was only a year and a half older than me. Anyway, didn't have a whole lot of money. My dad had a garage. He was a mechanic, and so we didn't really have very much. Didn't even have a very nice grandma. She was a woman from hell, I think. But anyway, life marches on, and then I was a depression kid. When I was about 10 years old, 9 years old, that was a year of the depression. And I remember how terribly hard up everybody was. We always had meat because my dad grew up on a farm, and so he knew a bit about farming. Now, where we lived wasn't a farm, but we had land around us. Can't see my hands. And so he always raised 2 or 3 pigs. And so then he knew how to butcher and salt the meat away. So we usually had meat, and we had a big garden. So we always had potatoes and like tomatoes and vegetables. And at that time there was a root cellar in our basement of our house, and so down there was where they had carrots and potatoes, and so for meals we had a lot of like tomatoes, but to stretch that out, my mother used to break up bread in the tomatoes, and she would fry potatoes and cut up bread, put them in, just to stretch the food out. So anyway, everybody had a hard time, and that's when I think it was President Roosevelt started the New Deal, and then people had more work, and so we did better. And at that time, we were going to St. Mary's. And so I went to St. Mary's. Well, those were, I don't think you want to hear about my crazy growing up anymore. We already heard about that one.
You can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, well, I already told you this once, but we were just kind of wild, running all over the neighborhood and on the tracks and up and down the trains and everywhere. And fortunately, I had my beloved Aunt Mame and I had my grandpa, so they were always there to help take care of me. And not to mention, one house over was my cousin Billy and my Aunt Helen, and she was always there for me too.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was lucky in that growing up that I had so many people around that loved me, which is so important, of course. And so anyway, went on to St. Mary's until I would have been going into the 11th grade, and I think that, I never heard him say this exactly, but I think that my mother and dad lost that house. And that's when my dad built a house at Ackerson. So then we moved out to Ackerson, and then I went to Napoleon. And I guess it's kind of interesting because going into Napoleon, coming from Jackson, I was looked on as quite a hotshot glamour girl, I guess. So that was fun. And I always had lot of boyfriends.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of boyfriends. And I guess the most impressive was that I had one boyfriend who was going to Michigan State at the time. His name was Dean Hopkins, Hop. And when it came to the prom time, of course I went with Hop. And this is how shallow I am. I thought this was such an exciting night because after this prom, and I was with Hop, who was a really big, good-looking guy. And in the meantime, I had been going out with another guy, and who was kind of nutty about me, and I got a little tired of him. Anyway, we went out to Bartlett's, which was a big dance place, and my mother had made me this cute formal. I thought I was just such hot stuff, and as we were going in, up shows this old boyfriend, Gene, challenges Hop to a big fight for going out with his girlfriend. Oh, God, I thought that was just so exciting.
Yeah.
So they sparred around a little bit, and that was about the end of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, me and Virginia, then after I graduated from Napoleon, Virginia graduated, we decided to spread our wings and we moved into town. And at that time, that had gone into the war years, and we got a job at Goodyear building tires, tanks, and the first place we lived is we rented a room from a lady called Mrs. Tereskavich. Well, Mrs. Tereskavich looked at me and thought I was going to make the perfect wife for her son, Bunny. Well, so Bunny came home on furlough. He was in the Army when we were still living there. And I made the mistake of going out with Bunny a couple of times. Wow, not good. So then Bunny thought that me and him were set up for life, I guess. And life goes on, and me and Virginia moved on to an apartment on Elm Avenue, a little more exciting. And one time this Bunny came home. This was like a movie. And I didn't really want to go out with this Bunny or have anything further to do with him. And so I said I wasn't going to go out with him. And we lived on the second floor of this apartment. And Bunny stood down on the sidewalk and yelled, "Phyllis," just as like the movie, "Phyllis! Phyllis, come down!" Oh, that was so funny.
Oh my God.
But anyway, when we lived in this apartment, of course I was young and pretty, I guess, and in the neighborhood were a couple of restaurants, and right around the corner was this one restaurant run by an old Greek guy who took quite a fancy to me, and so of course I took advantage of it. And used to go in there, and the guy used to cook me everything, never charge me anything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Virginia was still living there, and that's when I decided that I needed to spread my wings. And on my 20th birthday, then you had to be 20 to go into service.
Oh.
So on my 20th birthday, I went into the Navy, and my mother cried her head off and yelled and hollered, but anyway, I went anyway. And going on this train when we left, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? But anyway, it turned out to be great, in boot camp, I had the same roommates that I had for a whole 3 years, and it was wonderful. We had, oh my gosh, so much fun. Had some terrific boyfriends too in the Navy. That was great, great, great. It didn't hurt that I worked on a flight line checking out pilots. That was wonderful, wonderful. Anyway, war ended, got out of the Navy, came home, and went to beauty school. I was thinking about being a cosmetologist, but in the meantime, I was out with some girlfriends to a place a nightclub that was going at that time called the Villa B, and there I met Willie. And Cupid shot his arrows, and I danced with Willie, and he danced like Fred Astaire. That did it, right there. And Willie had an long-time girlfriend that he had gone out with all through high school and all. Her name was Ruthie, and I just got that Ruthie right out of the act, and so poor Ruthie.
Poor Ruthie.
And so anyway, then I don't know how long we went together. Not so long, maybe 7 or 8 months or something. And so we decided to get married. Didn't have very much, and well, I worked for some kind of a construction company who was building some kind of tract houses at that time. So anyway, that's when, and then of course, 1 month later I was pregnant. Let me say that everybody was relieved it was 1 month later. So then we had this, Will got a job at that time for a supply company, which was a better job, though it sure didn't pay much money. If you could believe this, he got $35 every 2 weeks. Not very much money. I think it all it did was pay the rent on this little teeny apartment, and that was about it, and got along on the rest of it. So Jody was born while we still lived in this little teeny apartment. And so then the supply company, you and I, offered Bill this job in Allegan into their pipeline supply company. And they made it sound like it was going to be a really big deal. So we moved to Allegan. Not that we had much to move. We didn't have anything. I think all we owned was a bed and a stove, maybe. So we moved in Allegan. Well, Allegan, I remember this old apartment, I bought a sofa for $5. So we had the sofa. And, we did have a rollaway bed and a baby bed. So we met there with baby Jody. And then shortly after, I was pregnant for Bill. And life wasn't easy with a baby and pregnant. And this job didn't turn out to be very great either. Not much money. We didn't own any money. We couldn't even come home to visit because we didn't have enough money to buy gas. And about the only thing we could ever do entertainment-wise was that we used to take the company truck and go for a ride. Big deal. right, the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice, though, that the church, Catholic church, was down the corner. So I did go down there, and I remember one time how disappointed I was because I thought, oh, these women are going to be so glad to meet me. Ha ha. And I got myself dressed, and Jody and the baby Bill all dressed up, put both these little kids in a stroller, and I had seen on a bulletin where they were having this meeting. So I took us all to this meeting, and not one person said hello to me.
Oh.
Well.
Their loss.
Life goes on. So about the thing there is every day I put a little leash on Jody because she would always run away. I had a little thing like a dog leash and put Bill in the stroller, and we would go for a walk and walk.
Mm-hmm.
One of the funny things about living in this apartment was the apartment backyard faced the backyard of the county jail. And so anytime I'd go out in the backyard to hang up clothes or little kids or something, all these guys in the jail would yell over at me. And
Oh my gosh.
so anyway, we stuck it out in Allegan for, I don't know, a couple years or a few years. And finally, we didn't have enough money to pay the rent there. And we were just falling far behind all the time. And so we came back to Jackson, and which turned out to be a good move because when we came back to you and I, that's when Bill told them that we didn't have enough money to get along. And that's when they offered him a job in sales. And so then things started looking up. And so not so long after that, after we lived in a couple of other places, then Dad and Mom offered to give us this land that our house is on. So that's when we decided that we would try to build something to live. And Willie didn't know one cotton-picking thing about building. But anyway, he read up on concrete, and all the free time, nights, weekends, and Dad helped him. Sometimes the other brother-in-laws helped, and built a basement. I'd like to say that it was wonderful, but it wasn't. So in the meantime, then I had Chris, baby Christine, and come back, if you can imagine this, where we had been living, just about the time I was ready to have Chris, we had to move out of. And so I came back from the hospital with this newborn babe and the other little kids into this basement where whatever we had was just in the basement with nothing. We had hardly any furniture. It was a terrible, terrible mess. So eventually we just put concrete floors, concrete walls, just got a cheap used rug, put it on the floor. We had brought back our wonderful $5 sofa that was still there. And so in the basement, all we had really was 2 rooms. And so the kids and us were all in the other room, and then we had this other room that we, kitchen, laughingly called the living room, and the kitchen, we still had our stove,
Mm-hmm.
and big old table that we had gotten from the DeMays.
Okay.
So every night, every evening, we did a little bit of work. Grandpa trying to get the frame up for the upstairs here.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to do it. We tried to pay for it as we went along, so we wouldn't have a lot of debt. And eventually, it was ready that we could take the roof off the basement and try to come up. Well, wouldn't you know? About the time, I don't even remember how exactly they did this, but about the time they got the roof off this basement, and the part of the subfloor on here, we had torrential rains. Everything that we did own in that basement had about 3 feet of water in it.
Oh my gosh.
But eventually, we did get the frame in of this upstairs here. And I remember, one of my best memories is I remember in the dinette here, I stood and I looked out the dinette window, and I thought it was the most wonderful thing in the whole world to look out that window and how wonderful it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think we spent probably about 5 or 6 years in the basement. And when I was in the hospital for Sean, I remember this so well. Well, number one, it was always so wonderful when I went to the hospital to have another baby, because that was the old Mercy Hospital. And of course, Willie and the rest of the kids always came to get me and the new baby, and I would come down, and there they would all be sitting, dressed up. It was just the most wonderful, wonderful thing. And so, anyway, when I had Sean, this was such a surprise. Came home from the hospital. In those days, you stayed in the hospital about a week.
Mm-hmm.
Not like now. Came home and kitchen was here.
Ah.
We had a kitchen. Before that, we came up, we just had bedrooms, and that was pretty wonderful, just to have bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So then we had bedrooms and a kitchen. So, not to brag, but we had all tile floors in here, and I did that by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny. I would be trying to do it. I would be trying to put tile down when there'd be a kid behind me with their foot in the cement or... Anyway. And as for the living room, this was one wonderful Christmas. In those days, we'd never put the Christmas tree up until Christmas Eve. The kids never saw the Christmas tree until Christmas morning. But this one Christmas, we were trying to finish just the floor in here. And so we stayed up all night, Christmas Eve, and we finished the tile in the living room, and then we put up the Christmas tree. And then the kids got up, and so exciting.
Oh.
So exciting. Yeah. We won't even go through the bad years when we all went through a terrible, terrible time when Christine died.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a hard time. And anyway, got through that. Life goes on. And kids went to kindergarten up at Napoleon. And, well, not Napoleon. Kindergarten was in Ackerson Lake at that time. So that's where Jody and Bill went. And it was wonderful, wonderful having little kids. We used to walk down to the lake, take peanut butter sandwiches. We used to walk behind here and go up on the cliff and eat, and it was wonderful. Those were the best days of my life.
Yeah.
When the kids were little. And then Bill did well, and then eventually Bill had been at UNI for quite a few years, and he and two other guys decided to go into business, and they called it Triple Mill Supply because of the three guys, and then that meant some more pretty hard up years because we had to borrow a lot of money to go into business. And so all the money that the company made had to go back into supplies and paying for it. And so anyway, it did okay because they all had so much experience. And then eventually Art, one of the guys, who was an older guy, left. More money gone because we had to pay for his share. That put us up back a few years. Okay. So then Bill and Dean were running the company, and that didn't work because Dean was not such a nice guy. And then eventually, back into hard times, we bought his share out. And that worked out okay. And by that time, as far as I'm concerned, I had never been able to do a whole lot outside of here, even though I was always very active in St. Mary's. And the sad thing was that it was an Ascension Thursday, and I was at church and Bill was home. And that's when Colin got killed. And I was called out of church. She came home. And that was another very, very, very hard time. I would, at that time, I would dream. My life went in reverse. I would dream. It was always birthday parties. I would dream I was having birthday parties for Colin and Chris, and we were all so happy. And then I would wake up. But anyway, life goes on whether you want it to or not, so moved along. And anyway, I always wanted to get into volunteer stuff. So when Kimberly was older, Kimberly the baby, by that time, and I was always very, very close with Betty Jo, me and BJ and Cork, the four of us, we did everything together. And so at that time, Betty Jo and I decided we would volunteer. We joined the Red Cross, and so we volunteered to work at Mercy Hospital. And so we went in and we gave visitor passes and went to rooms. We did all kind of things. It was wonderful. And Kimberly, I made a little nurse uniform for Kimberly, and she used to dress up in it, and I would take her with me sometimes. and she would sit there. She loved that. So being BJ did that for about 8 years at Mercy. And then and that was good. And we worked on blood collections. Yeah. Oh, by the way, another proud of myself. I'm a 12-gallon blood donor. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, then from there on in, as the kids got older, I joined a lot of things and did a lot of volunteer stuff. And I don't remember how old everybody was, but they must have been older. But anyway, I was friends with some people that had to do with Interfaith Shelter. So I started cooking at Interfaith Shelter. And, how it started was at that time, me and Grandpa went to a lot of things, took customers to a lot of things in business. And at that time, there were a lot of buffets with prime rib, and so I would bring the stuff home, and then I would make soup out of them and take it to the shelter. And then I thought, what am I, crazy? Why don't I just go there and cook it? So that's how I started cook there. And then I ended up cooking there for 25 years. Yeah, and I just absolutely loved it. Loved seeing all my poor brothers and sisters. And I always said, well, that could have been me. Could have been. Mm-hmm. This could have been my kids. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, me and Willie traveled and traveled. Our first really exciting trip was on our 25th wedding anniversary. Big deal. We decided we would go on a cruise with Betty Jo and Cork. So we went on a new ship, Song of Norway. Oh my gosh, we didn't have all the time in the world. It was a week, and Willie had a week off, Cork had a week off. So we drove straight through from here to Miami and got on this ship. Oh God, did we have a good time. We just danced all night and drank all that champagne, and we had a good time. Jody thought she'd lose her mind while I was gone because she was here with the kids, and evidently they weren't on their best behavior. Evidently, I think they sneaked off in the woods for party time and everything bad. But anyway, that was our first big travel. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was just so fun. Mm. And then from there on in, me and Grandpa did all kinds of travel. Me and Willie. Mm-hmm. And let's see, where do we go? Everywhere. China, Australia, lots of Europe, all kind of stuff. I guess I should say life went along happily. Are we running out of time?
No, plenty of time.
Life went along, and so Jody got married. She married David Schmidt, and I didn't think anybody was good enough for her, but he turned out to be. And Jody had David, who was absolute light of her life. And Jody worked at Mercy Hospital at that time. And so David, little baby, we about had a nursery for him, and he just about lived here. And so then when David was just going on 2, they decided to move to Florida, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I guess in my mind, I thought maybe I had somebody back. But anyway, I was heartbroken. And so they went to Florida. So after that, we were making money in the store by that time. And so then I went back and forth to Florida like it was across the street and would bring them home with me. And they would be here they would come for their whole summer vacation, winter vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they would, I don't think you probably do this now, but then sometimes they would put them on the plane wearing their pajamas by themselves.
Oh.
And we would pick them up at the airport, and the stewardess would be taking care of them.
Oh.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. That went on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then, in the meantime, I guess time marches on, and Kai married Jackie, and they lived over on Crispell Lake Road, and they had little Cass, and and in the meantime, Mother had finally gotten, so she was having a hard time, and us girls, all 5 of us, went around the clock with her. We each did 24 hours, and we did that for, I don't know, almost 2 years maybe. And so Mother's biggest worry, maybe like me, was what's going to happen to my house, because she loved her house. And I told her what I had in mind. Oh, well, to start with, when Dad died, Mother had a hard time financially. So Willie and I bought her house, gave her a life lease so that we owned that house. Mm-hmm. And so then after she died, Kai and Jackie were having a hard time financially, so we gave them this house.
Mm-hmm.
And which was wonderful. So they came over with baby Cass, and that was wonderful, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that all worked out great. And then, of course, after that, Jackie had, in the meantime, my sister Janice had died with cancer, and there was still the rest of us. So anyway, it was wonderful. And then Jackie had the twins. Well, had the twins actually.
Crispell?
When Crispell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had twins before they came over here. I can remember how funny that was. I think Jackie had intended to just have a midwife, but it didn't turn out when they discovered she was going to have the twins. And
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, it ended up that they all came over here, which was great, great. So life went along happily until Jackie began to have a couple bouts with breast cancer, and she was the bravest woman in the world. Me and Jackie used to go down and sit down to the lake, and Jackie loved that. She dearly, dearly loved the lake. She used to come down and rest on a sofa.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie was absolutely wonderful. And eventually Jackie passed, and like I say, life goes on. And Kai and kids came down here and lived for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good, interesting period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The girls were easy. Tyler tried to make the rest of us crazy all the time, but didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
And in the meantime, Kyle was like Superman, the way he worked on the house. Worked on the house. It was kind of like the basement here. One time when rain, he would try to do the inside of the house, and snow, rain, go in on the house.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, anyway, he got the house done. And they moved up, and it was wonderful. Wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
It was wonderful.
It was great.
And me and Willie kept moving on, and a lot more traveling. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm glad we did all the things that we did. And then finally dawned on us after a while that Willie was going into big Alzheimer's dementia. And so that went on for about 10 years. And so then another heartbreak thing, had to put Willie into care. I think that was probably one of the worst days of my life when took him in there and had to leave him because he tried to leave with us and he couldn't. I used to go out and see him every day, and it just broke my heart because when I was out there, he would almost always try to follow me out, and I couldn't. Awful, awful. And then eventually, he had a couple of bouts of pneumonia and had been in the hospital with pneumonia. But in all this meantime, he couldn't talk anymore. He didn't really have any speech except different sounds. And so on the last week, and he was sick, and I couldn't stand, I just couldn't stand the idea of him dying by himself. I couldn't. And so the last few days, I just went out and I got in bed with him at night because I didn't want him to die alone. And he didn't. He didn't. But anyway, again, life goes on. So then after a few years, I got my life back together, or tried to. So that's when I started doing a bit of traveling by myself. Wonderful, wonderful. Had some big adventures.
Yep.
Everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What a life, huh?
Indeed.
Yeah. So, I guess here I am in, life has been wonderful. Done wonderful things. I've had lots of heartbreak, but I guess maybe you have to have the really bad times to appreciate the good times. I think.
Yeah.
right now it makes me feel kind of bad that all of my sons have big problems. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
In the meantime, I thank God. I thank God for my church, for my religion. I thank God for the wonderful kids that I have, the blessings that I've had. That's it.
Thank you.